my name's Katherine and I've worked in the justice system for just over 20 years. At university, I studied law and psychology, and I never really thought I would practice law, but I was really interested in forensic psychology and in criminal law and criminal profiling as well. So once I finished graduating, I went and worked for South Australia Police for about 3 years. And so my first job was working as an intelligence analyst focusing on violent crimes, so homicide, sexual violence, and child sex offences. I definitely enjoyed my time at South Australia Police. I do think that there was a complete lack of understanding or heads up kind of thing around the nature of the work that I was going to be exposed to and how to manage that. So initially I did lots of reports on stranger perpetrated sexual assault and homicide, and back then there was a much higher prevalence of both homicide and stranger perpetrated homicide, but also stranger perpetrated sexual assault as well than there is now. So generally, I was early 20s and I lived by myself, and so it definitely changed the way that I behaved at home in terms of home security. I would lock my windows, I would lock my doors, I would make sure that they were all locked. I was fairly paranoid about that kind of thing. If I was walking back to my car at night, I would have my keys in my hand and be really conscious of what's around me. And so I definitely created some sort of unhealthy, but I guess understandable self-care strategies at that stage. So after working for South Australia Police for about 3 years, I then worked on the Pedophile Task Force, which was focusing on child sexual abuse in various churches. And at that stage, I then met with the psychologist attached to South Australia Police to talk through the potential for future trauma or vicarious trauma. So that was kind of ironic because when I met with him, I was like, what you're seeing from me today is not my baseline. This is me after 3 years of working in this area, being exposed to quite significant offending behaviours. And so his key question really that really stuck in my mind, he didn't give me any good strategies, he didn't make any suggestions. He basically said, does it excite you to work in child sex offending? And it was just such an inappropriate question. And I could tell it excited him to ask the question, but certainly he wasn't like, tell me about, your sleep patterns, tell me about your day-to-day behavior, your self-care, your, ways of keeping yourself safe. He didn't ask about any of that kind of thing. So at that stage, and we're talking a long time ago now, there certainly wasn't really effective organisational supports for me in working in that role. So since then, I've worked in a range of different jobs. I've worked for the Australian Institute of Criminology, again, researching sexual violence. I've worked in child protection, in youth justice, in Attorney Generals relating to criminal policy, in victim support service, a whole range of different agencies. Victim support service was really interesting because I worked with a lot of counsellors who worked with victims of crime, and they received a lot of professional support and supervision as social workers or counsellors within their roles. But because I was a manager of research, no one provided me with that kind of supervision or support or psychological kind of oversight, which is interesting in retrospect that they didn't actually acknowledge that maybe I would need that as well. I think in terms of advice that I would give to new people coming into the roles, look, I love working in the criminal justice system. I love so much about it. It just fascinates me. I've definitely shifted my attitudes towards people who offend the more I meet people who have offended or people who are in prison. But I would definitely say if you start a role, to make sure that you're aware of what the organisational supports are that are in place, so that you understand if you need to access any services or supports, you know how to do that. One of the key bits of advice that I've been given actually by a psychiatrist was, you can't change or fix a dysfunctional workplace. So if you go somewhere and you feel like it's not a safe place to be, or you don't feel comfortable there, or things are happening around you that you're witnessing that seem to sort of reflect a wider culture of the organisation, I would absolutely say, don't try and fix it, don't stick around, don't put up with it, just get out and find something else. I did once work for Parliament, and one of my colleagues there he'd just keep touching me, not in a sexual way, but he'd keep touching me all the time in a way that made me feel very uncomfortable. And I asked him not to do that, and he got offended that he should have the right to be wherever he wants to be and touch whatever he wants to touch. So he'd just touch me on the arm or whatever, or give me a hug or whatever. Anyway, the stuff that he was doing was making me very uncomfortable. And the way that Parliament was structured, there was no real HR or, people and culture service there to support me if I were to raise the issue that I wanted someone to talk with him about his behaviour. The good thing for me was I did have some really supportive colleagues there. So they would basically keep an eye out for him, make space between me and him, and sort of act as a protective barrier and be very supportive around that peer support element, which was fantastic. But ultimately, because it was a dysfunctional workplace for me, in my experience, I just had to leave. And that was my solution there, in terms of, there were a lot of really good things around the role, but at the end of the day, I didn't feel safe, I didn't feel supported, I didn't feel respected by my managers, and so I just had to get out of there. And I guess that's a key message for you. I really hope you find something in the justice system that you're passionate about, that you can really embrace as a job role and a career path for you. But you don't have to put up with uncomfortable or dysfunctional or actually, psychologically damaging workplaces. So if you are there and it just isn't feeling right for you, then, get out of there. That's the advice that I'd probably give.